Hi, Wendy. How are you? Hi, Claire. Well, I know the falling down. Yeah, falling right out probably for the middle day. Right. Yeah. We had to bring it out. Actually, emailed the parent who runs the Boy Scouts out there. Oh, yes. Yeah, and held them at the auction, antler auction. So my dog loves them. It's $35 to buy an antler. Whatever. I'll call them Boy Scouts. We can ship it from us, right? Yeah. But yeah, we have a giant leaf paddle. So that could be about like this. I mean, I say giant, it's only like this. Yeah, on the left. Yeah, it's pretty cool to see what it looks like. Yeah, Bubba came out of the woods one day with an elk antler. It was just like 4 or 5 hours earlier. Trucking out of the woods, like, and those things are nice. I remember buying They do. Yeah. He lost it like down in a ravine on a walk one day. Yeah. So we have a cell about it. We have a laugh. Yellow laugh. All right, I'm going to have a start. Everybody's got a lot to say. And, sure. I know people are going to trickle in, and that's okay. And my share your way so people feel comfortable coming in. And I always start by saying, if you need to leave, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Nobody's going to be offended. Bridget will keep going. And usually, people stay and ask questions. Shelley, you have a class at no class today? No class? All right. So we are here today to really talk about creating readers and writers, what we do at Inly, what you can do as parents to extend that learning, and also when we put this together and schedule this summer, we wanted to have an opportunity for you to meet Bridget Killian, who is our lower elementary children's house learning specialist, literacy coach, does a lot of work with all of the classrooms, and has brought in the Lucy Coffins writing program, which we had committed to last year, and really were intentionally looking for somebody who could come in and act as a coach as we bring that program into our Montessori setting. It's always tricky when you bring a program into a Montessori setting, but that's the one that a lot of Montessori schools are using, and we really wanted to find a writing program that created that culture of writers that we want to have, and that did it in an intentional way that could align all the way through the school. So that was the program that we've chosen. Lower elementary parents see it modeled this year. We're introducing it, and our upper elementary teachers are trained in that program as well. So it's going to be a really nice kind of addition to our writing program. But as well as that, we've been doing a lot of work on reading and literacy skills and talking a lot about that this year with teachers, and Bridget has a wealth of experience in that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So I thought I would just share a little bit about myself and my experiences. So I went to school at UVM to get my undergraduate degree in elementary ed, and then I received my master's in Florida Gulf Coast, in special education. And then in between those 2 degrees, I had many years of teaching experience, like 16 years of classroom experience, both as a regular ed teacher and then also as the inclusion teacher. So I was regular ed teacher, but then having to differentiate because a larger portion of the population of my class actually had language-based learning disabilities. And so that's why my focus turned towards special education for my master's, and specifically language-based learning disabilities. And then in between all of that, I shifted from the public school world into independent schools. So I've worked at independent schools in Florida as well as out in Jackson, Wyoming. So I've had an opportunity to kind of just experience the independent school life from many different perspectives. And I have to say that I can appreciate and value the schools that I've been at as I step into Inly. I feel like they gave me kind of tools that helped me to really transition into a Montessori school in a very purposeful manner, and that I can share the knowledge that I have with the teachers, and then also see how that melds so perfectly with the Montessori philosophy. What I did over the last couple of days is I sat and I thought and I wrote, and this kind of the same way that the kids do, and conferred with Julie and sat and wrote some more. And then I started to think about, what are some things that we're just intentionally doing with the kids in the classroom. So I thought I would just share some of the lessons that have been taking place in the classroom. And while doing that, just sharing with you kind of the perspective on teaching reading and writing. And this is very much a model that I like to share with parents, because not only do we do it with our instruction in school, but I think as a parent myself, and I think about how I approach my little ones in their learning, that I try to keep this idea of a gradual release of responsibility in mind. And so we start with this where we are modeling. We're modeling reading in class. We're modeling reading. We do that through our shared reading. We do that during read aloud. If at home during family reads, and modeling how you read a book, even if it's inflection, or how thinking out loud about the questions you have for that book. And then we gradually move into those interactions with the child. And so you're giving them a little bit more control of that conversation. You're asking them questions and then allowing them the opportunity to ask you those questions. And then eventually, you're leading them to a path of independence. And I think that through that modeling, pleasure with books, the children find pleasure in books. I was flipping through, Kathy Collins is out of Columbia University. She's a part of the Reading and Writing Project, which is all linked to writing, reading and writing workshop, bless you. And came upon a quote of hers, and she was talking about how, as educators, our wants for readers are that we want children who develop a true passion for books, that when they go on vacation, they have a book in hand. As adults, they have a book on the subway. That a book just becomes a part of who they are. Our ultimate goal isn't our activities and lessons for them to take away, but for that to give them the tools to understand and comprehend. But their actual takeaway is that modeling our love and passion for books will instill that passion for books within children.
I just want to say, at that point, that leads to Shelley.
Yes.
And having Shelley and Mary here, who are really modeling that passion for reading all the time, and knowing what is that exact right book for the interest of your child, and continuing those conversations. And I think teaching with Shelley in the middle school for years before I was assistant head of school, I really would see the relationship she had with kids as they came into 7th grade that I was forging for the first time, because I didn't really know them as well. And now I get it. I see how much time they spend in the library, how much time she spends with every child, knowing everything they're thinking about, and what book to pick next, and asking that conversation, and all the million of little emails and notes that are left on her desk all day long about those conversations. And I think, from my perspective, watching Bridget and Shelley work in tandem, which they do all the time, I feel like we have that perfect blend of passion and skill kind of coming together for each individual child, which is, and then you've got the classroom teachers on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really nice to watch. So,
and even as Shelley and I help the kids choose books, it's asking those intentional questions. Well, what was it about that book that grabbed your attention? Why did you think that you wanted to read that book? Or let's look at the cover. I always start every book group when we start a new book with, let's just look at the cover. What can you tell me about the story just by looking at this picture? And they start to create the story. And that's even, with my toddler. She sleeps with a pile of books every night, and that is, she loves her books. Can I just have a big pile, Mommy? And she sits in her bed and she looks at the pictures and she'll go, oh, and this, and she's totally making up the story. She has already instilled a passion for books just through that process. She truly is a reader at this point, because she understands the form and function of books, and she understands the importance of those illustrations. And so she's kind of naturally gravitating in that progression. I hope number 2 does that, but I don't know. She doesn't sleep with a pile of books yet. But it's those types of just conversations about books, and starting right here. I do a lot of talk with the kids about even the importance of, in some of the trade books, the end pages, which are I call them the curtains to the book. So in a book like this, it doesn't have end pages. But that color actually has an importance. What do you think the color stands for? Or did you notice that this end page, when I opened the curtain to the story, had one subtle illustration on it, but when I look at the end page at the end of the book, oh my gosh, it's totally different. What do you think the illustrator did that? So having those conversations with so that they're thinking deeper about the book. I'm not just reading this book to find out, A Kiss for Little Bear. I'm really learning about this book from the writer's perspective, and I think that's the tie-in too. A lot of conversations that I have during shared reading or during a read aloud is modeling my thought process as to why the author put that in the book the way they did. I love the way the author used that piece of dialogue right there, or just looking at the size of the text. Like, oh my gosh, it said BAM, and it was in large print with an exclamation point. What does that mean? And the little ones are like, it's really loud. Like, well, then you better read it really loud. So just verbalizing those pieces gets the kids excited about the book. If they can start to create the whole story just by looking at the picture, they get even more excited to flip through the pages and read the actual story. So I just thought I would share with you, this is a book I read with a Children's House reading group the other day, and I had the 3 kids in my office, and we were really working on the process of summarizing and retelling and thinking about the wants and struggles of characters in a book, which seems kind of deep for a kindergartner to be thinking about the wants and struggles of a character, but they were on fire. So, and they laugh at my illustration. So this is a remake of the graphic organizer, and I had to remake it because they were so excited they're taking turns to bring it home at night. They wanted to show their parents. They're like, well, your skunk looks like a hedgehog, and I'm like, well, that's not the importance information. But so we walked through the process of A Kiss for a Little Bear. And so what we did was we went through the story, and as we were reading it, we plotted the characters. So you have Little Bear draws a picture. He gives it to Hen, who gives it to his grandmother. Grandmother gives a kiss in return to Hen to bring back to Little Bear. And then along the way in all stories, you'll see, so Little Hen ran into a group of friends. That was her roadblock. So what then was the next event? She ran into Frog, gave the kiss to Frog, and along the way he saw a pond and wanted to go for a swim. And so they were able to, and I didn't tell them that this color represented anything or that this block represented anything, but just use the language like, oh my gosh, it really seems like Frog has hit a roadblock. What was the roadblock? Oh, he wanted to go for a swim. So he gave the kiss to Cat. And so we went through the whole process. And by the end of it, they were able to see that this story, and I asked them, I said, what did we learn about, what do we know about stories? Well, there's characters. Yeah. Well, what do we know about those characters? They all had a roadblock. And they're using that language. And then what else do we know about stories? This story had a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that was, for me, a pretty enriched conversation for 3 kindergartners to have about A Kiss for Little Bear. So taking it that one step further in those comprehensive conversations. And then from there, our activities, so as I move and think about my first years in LE, and I think about reading group with them, one of my reading groups is reading Mouse Tales. And so we do this chapter by chapter, very similar to that thought process, thinking about the characters and their wants and struggles, but providing them another venue to kind of display it, another way to organize it. And so this is called a Somebody Wanted But So. And it's just like a flip book. So it's very interactive with them. It's very hands-on. They get to create it. They do the folding. They do the writing. This is my example one. And so we talked about, we do it for each chapter. So what was the somebody in our first chapter? The somebody was Mouse. And what did Mouse want? Or what was one of Mouse's wants? She wanted her wishes to come true. And then they would illustrate it down here later, and they do this writing in theirs. But what got in Mouse's way? Gosh, the wishing well kept yelling ouch when she threw the penny in. So what did Mouse do to resolve this problem? Mouse put her pillow in the well first. And so they're summarizing, they're retelling, they're pulling details from the story. And there are multiple wants and struggles for Mouse in the book, but this was the one that they walked away with. And so we talk about this and we carry this conversation further. So that idea of this bigger picture conversation here in kindergarten, moving into a little more specific, and then we'll do it chapter by chapter for the first years. And all along, this all transitions into the language of writing workshop. So the writer really had to think about what the wants were for Mouse. And why do you think the writer chose to make those wants in this book? And so as I work with second and third years, we take that conversation even further with them. Trying to think. I brought also just some examples of the writing process for writing workshop, because I think as we're thinking about readers, I try to instill in the kids that readers are writers and writers are readers. And so you can't do one or think about one without thinking about the other. When we think about writing, we're thinking about our audience and that audience of readers. And so we have to have that clarity and that understanding of our story. And even though we have what's called the movie in our mind, and as we're going through the writing process, I'll say to them, close your eyes. Can you see the movie in your mind? What is the movie in your mind about your story? So as I look at your words, is that same movie here on the paper? And they'll say, no, I need to add this, or I need to do that. And those are the conversations they have with each other. I had one third year who, surprisingly enough, he's like, I have never taken a picture with a smartphone before, but I want my character to take a picture with a smartphone. And so I said, okay, hold my phone, take a picture of your friend across the table, and tell me, what is your body doing? How did your trunk change? What were you doing? What did you do with your eyes? And so as he physically experienced that, he then was able to go back and put it into his story. And so making writing come alive for them. But then still keeping in mind this organization and structure. So I'll just kind of flip the pitch for Little Bear. And I have to tell you, got a little hairy here with the skunks. So there was a lot of passing the kids back and forth, and the kids thought that was hysterical. And they wanted to keep this for Valentine's Day next year. They thought that was really sweet. So this is just part of what I'm going to take this down so you can see that teaching point at the top there. This is just a small glimpse of what LA students are doing right now in writing workshop. And so they're currently working on a realistic fiction writing unit of study. And so before they even start writing an actual story, their focus is on character development. And Lucy Calkins will say in her lessons that you need to know your character so well that you could tell me how much money they have in their pocket at this moment right now. And so the kids spend a couple of weeks really thinking about those characters, who they are on the inside, what they look like on the outside. How do people in their lives perceive them and feel about them? And we're having those conversations with first graders and second graders and third graders. And it's to the point where some of them are like, I think my character could be sitting right here in morning meeting and participating in this conversation. So the teaching point is writers create characters that they know well before writing their actual story. And so, and they pull from themselves, and that's the thing that I love about writing workshop. All of writing workshop comes from within you. I don't tell you what to write because I'm your teacher. You're going to tell me what excites you, or what part of you do you want to come alive on the page. In the same way that when we approach books with kids, what is it that you love about this book, and why do you gravitate towards this book? And so let's go find more books like this. So the writing is all about them, and I model it, and then the kids help me add to it. So this was, I pull small moments from my life, or I pull character traits about myself, and I model that for the kids. So talking about my being part Italian, and I have brown hair, and of course the kids added, well, maybe she's also part Chinese. I'm like, okay, let's add that in there. We made her name Mary, and I told them that my grandmother's name was Mary, and so that name is important to me. And I think about her age. I want her to be 9 years old, and so when we go through the writing process, well, remember, she's 9 years old, so is that action realistic for a 9-year-old? And they'll be like, oh, no, that doesn't make sense. I need to keep her real. And then also thinking about who she is on the inside, and this is where you learn a lot about the kids. And so I share with them, again, these are things about me when I was a kid. I was afraid of the dark. I wasn't good at sports. They're like, really? You weren't? I'm like, nope, missed that kickball every time it rolled at my feet. And, they learn that I'm not just someone teaching them a writing lesson, but I'm sharing with them my life. And then that passion that I start to have while participating in these lessons kind of drives their passion for the writing. They know more about my sisters than I think my sisters really want them to know. So that really drives the instruction as well. And so writers begin with what they know already. They make their character a bit like them. Characters resemble someone they know. And then their characters may change over time. So it may be a character that starts out really tough, but by the end of the story, she becomes more of a gentle person. Or she might be rather impulsive, but by the end of the story, there's a switch in her, and she becomes a little bit more thoughtful. And really modeling this process for them, modeling the writing process, and even modeling the reading process. So when we sit and read books, I intentionally will laugh out loud, so that the kids will be like, what's so funny over there? And like, oh my gosh, this is the most hysterical part of my book. I'll tell you about it later. It's really funny. And then you'll see the kids will be like, with their books, but modeling that excitement in the same way. And then this was just my teacher notes down here. The kids always have an active engagement. There's some form of a turn and talk or some form of a participation where they're going to help me to develop my character a little bit further. So then their investment starts to build into my story, and then that carries over into their takeaway. And I did bring with me, there's a whole slew of pages in here, but I did bring I had one experience with, I was sitting with a third year, and we were writing, and we were working on the revisions of his story, and he had this ginormous story, and I had said to him, I want you to turn to the page that you are most passionate about in your story. Where is the heart of your story? And he's like, well, and he's flipping through like 3 or 4 pages. He's like, I think it's right here. It's on this page. And I said, okay, guess what? All the pages that came before, I want you to take them off. Because this is where your story is. It's right here. And he was like, oh, no, I don't really want to do that. I said, as a writer, I'm going to ask you to do it because I think you'll see where we're going. He plucked them off and he put them in his story. And we sat there and we're talking about inserting small actions and using dialogue and dressing up the setting of the story a little bit and giving those details. And the whole time we're having this conversation, there was a first year sitting with us at the table, and she was just quietly working on her story. And I was completely unaware that she was totally engaged in what we were doing and the conversation that we were having. And so this third year and I were talking about how you could really start, a strong lead of your story with a noise or an action of some kind. And this first year tapped me and she goes, Bridget, can I read you my story? And I was like, sure. And so I did. I brought her story. So her story is, and this is just the first page of her story, is Ella and Fluffy at school playing pirate. And so part of that organizational process is that they write what goes on this page, and then they only write about that scene on this page. But this first year student started with, boom, the stick hit the tree. Cool, said Fluffy. So here I was trying to get a third year to do this, and I had a first year right there at the table, and she was like right on it. And it gives me goosebumps to even share that with you. And then she was able to share that with the third year. It was awesome, it was really awesome to see. And then by the end of the lesson that third year was like, I totally get what you're saying. And I was like, thank you. He's like, I understand what you're saying. And then having him be able to talk with her and have that conversation about the writing process and what they were thinking of as writers took that writing to a whole another level that day. And I think that's what excites me about writing workshop and having it here at Inly and in a Montessori classroom where you have that age range. You wouldn't typically expect that to happen with, a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, but by golly, they had the greatest conversation. Or, for my kindergarten reading group to be talking about those wants and struggles and become so passionate about Little Bear. I mean, who knew Little Bear could be that exciting? So, and I get really excited. I could talk to you guys all morning about this, but I wanted just to be able to share some of the elements of the things that are happening here in Children's House in LE, and that these conversations carry over into UE. I love being able to go down to UE and talk with the teachers and when I can grab a middle school teacher, in my trips. Just catching up and seeing what's going on and knowing where this is going to go and knowing that this is truly enriching an opportunity for the students and building on what's to come as they transition.
So can you talk a little bit about all the different elements of reading?
Yes.
So I think reading teacher, reading is reading, and there's so many parts.
Yeah. So this, just to give you a picture, our reading program is really based on the idea of a balanced literacy program. And so there are different aspects to reading, and what we do is we integrate them within all of the work that we do. And they tied in perfectly with the Montessori materials because they are based on these elements of reading, and then we enrich that even further with programs like reading and writing workshop. So the 5 strands of a balanced literacy program is that phonemic awareness, phonics.
What does that mean?
I will tell you.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. So as a child, my takeaway was vocabulary and comprehension. That's what I worked on. I never really realized that phonemic awareness and phonics and fluency were all happening as well. And so what phonemic awareness is the kids learning the sound relationships. And so understanding that a C says k, but they're not actually looking at the C yet. They're just learning the sounds, and they're learning how to segment words and that encoding process. And so the phenomenal thing about Montessori is that they begin the reading process with understanding encoding and phonemic awareness. So if you are aware of those sounds and you understand what those sounds are and how to make those sounds, that transitions into the phonics piece. And so phonics is making that sound symbol correlation. So when I look at the letter C, I already know it says K. So you have to auditorily process, then you make that visual connection. The kids are doing that when they're working on their word letters in class. When they're using their movable alphabets, they're making that connection from phonemic awareness into that phonological awareness. And then on top of that, there's the fluency piece. And so with fluency, that's just the kids' ability to read with fluidity and accuracy. And so when they're reading out loud, are they reading with intonation? Are they recognizing the importance of the punctuation? Do they have a change in inflection when there's a change in character? So those are the things I like to model for the kids. With all the different characters in A Kiss for a Little Bear, I tried to change my voice slightly and model that for the kids. But the fluency piece will help build upon the literal comprehension piece. So if they can read with fluency, they're going to get that basic literal comprehension piece. And then we scaffold that by pushing the literal thinking to more inferential, getting them to think deeper or just on a higher level. And so that's where we get into those conversations about the wants and the struggles of characters, or the influence of setting, and how is that going to change the character's actions.
And I think one of the things that's really important is stopping and asking kids to make predictions. Mm-hmm. What do you think is going to happen next? I think is one of the greatest things that as a parent you can do, because you're then able to assess, I've been able to comprehend enough to be able to make a prediction based on what I've gained about the character. So if they make a prediction that is completely like, how is that possible? Why would you think that's going to happen? It's very kind of, I think they're going to hit their brother next. Really?
What told you that?
So then the question is, what have they done before that makes you think that? Yeah. And that, having to stop and reflect on that is really important. And I think I missed that when I was a parent reading. I didn't really get that when I was teaching about how important that little stop is to say, what do you think is going to happen next?
That just reminds me, Julie, of the conversations I have with some of my LE reading groups. We're reading realistic fiction, and we're reading stories with kids that are around their age. So they relate really well to the characters. So a couple of my reading groups are reading Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. And so you have Peter, and he has his little brother Fudge, the Judy Blume, start of the Fudge series. And many of them can relate to having that younger sibling that is wild or crazy, or they are the younger wild, crazy sibling. And so making that self-to-text connections helps the kids to really become more invested in the book. And I've had a few of the kids say, I went home and I asked my dad to get me the other book, and we're reading it together. And so having those intentional conversations and choosing books that have high interest for the kids is super important. It's how you get that buy-in to reading. I was laughing at myself the other day because I don't think I had buy-in to reading until I was in 7th grade, sitting on the end of my dock with the entire Sweet Valley High series of books. And I read 3 a day from sun up to sundown. And, those are the books I connected with. And for some reason, from that point on, I became a reader.
I love those.
Yeah, I mean, Sweet Valley High, all 130,000 of them, I read them in the summer. But for me as a teacher, it is so important to give that level of buy-in and interest to, even to my 3-year-old as a mom. And so I want her to have that early on. I don't want her to be me in 7th grade at the end of the dock reading Sweet Valley High, finally being invested. I want her to do that, and she does do that now. So I hope that stays with her. But just to know that having those intentional conversations and being just kind of aware of their interests and what their curiosities are, and really listening to their responses. You learn so much about what they value within themselves based on what they value from the characters, what they can take away and walk with.
I want to interject something there that makes me think about the age thing, because I think a lot of people worry about that. If your child's not invested in reading already, is it too late? What do I do? And I can say that I have a 7th grade son, and we read all the time in my house. So we model reading. My older son liked to read. My younger son did not like to read. And I think what started him reading was Shelley, giving him Walter D. Myers books that were high interest for him. That, to me, was like, oh, God, it's not Vietnam War. I do not want to read, like they were boy, I hate to say that, but that kind of action, kind of deeper, grittier, that's what he wanted to read about in 7th grade and think about in 7th grade. And he had that opportunity to do that and to read with Shelley and to talk about those books, and then they would exchange emails over the summer, or I'm going to pick one book for you that I want to challenge you to see if you're going to like that book this summer, and then tell me if you like it or not. Anyway, it happened much later in my child's life, and I had already given up, like, oh, he's never going to be a reader. What did we do wrong? And he's an English major in college, and all he does is read. And on his resume, what do I want to do? Read. Never could have believed that would happen. I'm just saying that because the trajectory is not that straight trajectory. If you're a reader in kindergarten, you're going to be a lifelong reader. Sometimes it takes a while. So.
Yeah. It's a common question here in the library, like with parents who stop by and say, oh, she's just not, as Julie was saying, like she's in the 2nd grade or 3rd grade, and I want her to like books more than she does, or whatever, be more of a reader. And it does happen for everyone at a different time. I see 7th and 8th graders every day for whom it's just clicking in. And now they found one book that opened up a world of other books to them. This morning I got an email from an 8th grade boy who's never asked me for a reading recommendation. An email this morning looking for March break books. So he's not somebody I would have thought of as a reader last year. So you don't know. It's going to click in. They're going to find that right book. And I was thinking, Bridget, when you were talking about those questions, they're the same questions we ask in middle school. When Julie was talking about what made you think that the brother was going to hit the sister or whatever, it's the same thing we ask in a middle school literature group when a student brings something up and we say, what made you think that? But there we would say, find it in the text. What led you in that conversation to think this? So what Bridget's doing in 1st grade looks really different in 7th and 8th, but they're many of the same questions. Yeah?
I'm getting way ahead of where I'm at right now because my daughters are in the toddler house. Not toddler house, children's house. But how do you sustain this, right? Like right now, me and my wife, every night we're reading, right, to them, and they love it. And it's books in the bed, they sleep with it, they pick 4, 5, 6. My parents never read to me when I was 12. What do you do? I mean, I love these drills. At what point At what point are these exercises something I should begin introducing at home? And what do I do when they're 10? Do you still read to your child?
Yeah.
Well, what about when they're 13?
Sure.
Or you can, at that point though, well, the earlier question, Bridget can answer better about the earlier years, but as my son got older, I wasn't obviously reading to him, but I would say, what are you reading? Tell me about it. And then I would, as he got a little older, I would start to say, I'm reading this really cool book, and let me tell you the story of it. Or, tell me what you're reading. Like in high school, obviously, he was reading all kinds of things I wasn't reading, but I would always ask at dinner, so what is that story? I never read it, even if maybe I already had. I'd heard about that. I read it so long ago. Remind me what that's about. Just keeping that conversation going, just like adults do. What are you reading these days? What's going on? What do you like it? And then but the earlier part of the question about starting stuff, that's
well, and the other thing I would say in the older part too is that this is, if you're maybe not reading to them, but you're reading along with them.
Right.
So my kids would always, and this was an investment of time. Mom, you have to read this book.
yeah.
And I had to read that book.
Yeah.
Because they wanted, that was a conversation and that was a really rich opportunity. And never was it really about the book. It always led to some deeper connection, or what would you do in that situation? Or have you ever experienced something like that? And maybe a story would come out that they wanted to tell me, but it was easier to do it through the characters. So that becomes really essential.
I would say too, like, offer them books that you've read. I mean, probably not to be really high, but like classics that you read and that you enjoyed. You know, I read this book. I read Charlotte's Web as a kid. I love this book. It's so phenomenal. I want to share this with you because I really like this, what E.B. White did with this character. And you can go into deeper. Or I found this article in the newspaper today. I cut it out for you. I thought you would want to read it because it's about the Olympic skiers and you're an avid skier. So showing them that you're invested in them with their personal interests and curiosities, and then providing them reading and making them aware that you're aware. Because if they know that you're truly invested in what they're invested in, and then you're providing those things to them, they're going to pick it up and they're going to want to read it.
And that's a really good point I hadn't really thought about is in this day and age where everything is YouTubeable, and I want to get it from somebody saying it to me, the old-fashioned, have you read this article? Yeah. We did a lot. I didn't really think about that, but we read. So we would say, oh, I want to read this article with you, and I think about that now. How intentionally you kind of have to be about that because it's so easy to get information out of it.
Or like letting them subscribe to a magazine and getting it in the mail.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's huge.
Oh my gosh, I got you the subscription to Time for Kids. You have to look for it in the mail. And that, you know, I can remember waiting by the mailbox. Like, I can't wait to get something with my name on it, you know, and it's so cool. But like Time for Kids or National Geographic for Kids. And when you have those reluctant readers, those are great places to start because the visual aspect of those types of magazines grab them first. And then, oh my gosh, let's read the captions with those pictures. And now let's read the story that goes with those captions, that goes with those pictures. And that's really one way to really handle those reluctant readers. You know, not only did this come in the mail with my name on it, but I love frogs, and it's all about tree frogs this month. So just one kind of it too. Becky?
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, the reading to children as they get older. My son is 9, and I would call him a reluctant reader, and yet when we read together, I often will be reading to him. And I think because of my reading to him and modeling the stories and the more complex text, he really loves reading. Now, is he the one reading the words? Not always, but he's certainly being able to have the conversations, and I will stop and we will chat about those kinds of things. But, you know, I think it's hard to have a conversation about reading because every single child is going to have a different ability at a different place. And so what I've come to realize is, you know, it's okay if most of our conversations result from my reading to him at this point. And the more he enjoys hearing the stories, the more he will want to kind of do independent reading in his own free time.
Absolutely.
And whereas my kindergartner will pick up all the different Bob books that we have at home and go off on her own. So even in my own home, I have 2 entirely different trajectories, I think.
Yeah.
We'll see. But I think reading to your child is our favorite time of the day. And no matter how, he's going to be bigger than I am in another year probably too. So I think it's a lovely opportunity. Yeah.
And there are great resources, and I'll share this with you guys, but on this is more like kind of the Montessori philosophy and the connections to those lifelong readers. And then on the back, I just kind of gave some, like, what could you do as parents? So there's just kind of some little things that you can do, so feel free to take this. And there's also some online resources here. So readwritethink.org is fantastic, as well as the International Reading Association. They just have great parent resources. So that is here for you, but just so you guys know that.
And I think it's a good time to talk about the difference between being able to decode and read with fluency and being able to comprehend.
Absolutely.
And you're going to find kids that have, reading differences where it's going to be really a struggle for them to decode or encode or, really kind of pick out the word. Don't stop reading or doing books on tape or reading to them or having those conversations, because it's often the dyslexic kids who can make the greatest connections, who are really global thinkers, and when we stop the conversation at what their actual reading level is, we do them a great disservice, because there is a lot of technology now that is out there that helps with supporting the reading, the actual reading of the words. There's a lot of technology out there that is going to do that. But the development of the brain and the being able to ask those questions and make those connections and think at that higher order has to happen. So I think we make it's a disservice to kids and even where they can actually read.
Yeah.
Can I ask about the decoding and my son is a second year, and he often will read in the same room where I might be doing something else, and then he'll say, Mom, here's this big word, let me spell it for you. So he spells it, and then I have to think really quickly. When they put you on the spot, like this, like taking to you. So anyway, last night's word was enchantress, which I didn't expect him to know.
Yeah.
But then he won't listen to me when I try to tell him what it is. Like, I know there's a fine line between keeping the reading going versus having no clue what you just read. And I just wanted to get your take on that, because it drives me nuts when he won't even let me define it or say, well, what is an enchantress? Because I'll say to him, do you know what an enchantress is? And he doesn't even want to, stop.
He just wants to go.
So,
yeah, I think that some of that is, they just have learned habits, and so he knows that I'm more to read and I'm going to get my reading done, and there's no time to stop. I'm just going to do it. And I think a lot of, what I joke with the kids in reading group, and I'm like, whoa, slow down, let's slow your roll. And they're like, okay, what? And I'll say, let's rewind. I want to revisit that word. I'm not sure what that word means, So instead of saying, let me tell you what that word means, I know that word, but I can't remember what it means. What in the story what could you tell me about the story that's going to give me a clue about that word? And sometimes you have to fight through it a few times to get them to stop and pause, and then after a while it becomes more of a habit of reading. But it's just getting that shift, and I know that frustration, because the kids will do it to me in a reading group, and they'll be like, can we just read? No, we can't just read. We have to actually stop. And
so you do support that we should slow them down and ask them to tell us what they think it might mean based on what they've read already.
And I would just phrase it as I think I have an idea of what that word means. I think it might have something to do with someone who's magical, but I'm not sure. Is there something in the story that you would tell me? And so if you phrase it on you, it will more likely slow him down, as opposed to, I just want to know if you know it.
The other thing I would say, and Shelley, you see this all the time, I think, is the rewarding kids or praising kids based on their ability to read the words versus their ability to understand and tell the story. So a lot of parents think that because they can read the words, they're good readers. That's not what a good reader is. That's a good, decoder. That's not a good reader. And so really, if you take nothing else away from this, other than how complex reading is, and it's not just about being able to say the words, you will be doing a great thing for your kids. Because I see that all the time. My child read it 3 on his realized he couldn't read, and he was afraid he was going to be stupid. So now English majors. They're just really, they are just different how they learn to read and what they do. But I couldn't keep my one who could read quickly in the right books because he wanted to read the words he could read. Does that make sense? So the bigger the book, the smarter he was. And so there was a big push to try and keep him in smaller books that actually were right for his age and his moral and social, emotional development. And Shelley is probably, that was our first conversation together, a long time ago. And that was my litmus test of Shelley, because I couldn't find librarians who were on my same page about this. I need a book that my 7th grader who can read 12th grade level is actually right for my 7th grader. Shelley's like, here's a whole shelf.
This happens all the time. If I were doing a list of top 5 questions in the Inly Library, it would be number 1. Especially from kids. They think because they've learned to decode everything and they know all the words, I will give them a book and they'll say, but I can read a longer book now because I know all these words. But books obviously change in their maturity and in the questions they ask and the things, all kinds of issues they bring up and the connections they ask people to make. So it's a really common thing, and parents ask it all the time. She or he is reading at a 9th grade level, but the books obviously aren't appropriate. So that's a separate issue, but come in any time. The thing is, you don't need to rush it. There are enough books for every kind of reader, more than you'll ever get to. So there's no reason to read something that's...
And I think, too, the reading at home piece versus the instructional reading at school. So we, as teachers, spend a lot of time thinking about what is instructionally appropriate for a child. So what level book am I going to place a child so that I can push them on their vocabulary development, or I can push that comprehension a little bit further.
Or reading stamina.
Which is kind of our focus now as we transition towards the end of the year. But then I also think about how you don't ever want reading to become a chore. You don't want reading or writing to become perceived as work. I have to do this for work. So you really want them to choose their books. And then we give them those strategies to choose the appropriate books. So doing like the 5-finger test. So opening to a page, if you missed 5 words on the page, that's telling me that this book is probably better as a family read aloud, or we could read it together, or you could read a page to me and I'll read a page to you, or we'll figure out those words together. But if you're going to be reading a book independently, we need to always be checking for that 5-finger test, or those 5 words on the page. But going to those high interest books, allowing them the choice, really, if you have, like I have more books at home just from my years of teaching, but putting a selection of books out and saying, these are our family books for the month, and we're going to be reading all about fall, so I chose books about fall and keeping them out. And so kind of narrowing the focus, or I noticed the other day that you were really curious about dinosaurs, so I pulled all our dinosaur books, or I got all these dinosaur books from the library. We're going to leave them out for the next couple weeks. And so these are going to be our just right reading book set for home. So helping them to kind of gear the focus. I mean, my house looks like Barnes & Noble exploded in it. And Maeve whips out Magic Tree House, and I know she can't read it. But she's 3, but when we read our books, we're very intentional about the picture books. Or, if she wants to read a book to Inly, who's 17 months, then she'll, very purposely pick out a board book that she has memorized, and she can read it to her. But I guess intentional choice, but keeping that high interest and curiosity alive.
To that point, I don't know if I'm enabling a bad behavior or not, but so coach me through this, right?
Sure.
My 3-year-old has like 3 books she loves, and it's like, I'm going to read it over and over and over. It could be on the bed for a month.
Yeah, that's okay.
And then I'll suggest, why don't we read this tonight? No, Daddy, I want this. I want Fancy Nancy. Okay. And now I'm reading it. I'm not even looking at the page. I'm not even going to it's like, I got to commit it to memory. I'm dreaming about it. Am I doing the wrong thing?
I would. Okay. I mean, I do that with my 2 girls at home. I've read That's Not My Puppy to Maeve since she was, 12 months old, and she's 3 now, and she likes to read That's Not My Puppy and Hop on Pop, and You're Not My Mother. Or Are You My Mother? Something like that. Are You My Mother? Yeah, with a snort,
This happens as they get older too, with Magic Tree House, where parents come in and say, we've read so many Magic Tree House, I want him or her to get something else, and with picture books, it happens a lot. I think it's really, I know it's hard on our end, I think it's absolutely okay and actually good for them sometimes. With Magic Tree House parents, that comes up a lot here, where people say, parents will say, we've read every Magic Tree House 7 times, I want her to get something else. But it might be serving a need for them that it's beyond, for us, doesn't make sense. The thing about series books that many of your kids are into, and probably with picture books it's doing the same thing, it's predictable, and so when so many things are changing and uncertain, like reading is hard or something else is challenging right now, Jack and Annie are going to start here and end there. And so all of those other factors, you can relax a little bit if you're trying to work on reading. You can let some of that go because you know the arc of the story, and it gives you comfort in moving to the next stage. So when parents come in and say, no more Magic Tree House, I ask them, no, let them keep going or find another series. But that's what's happening with those series books. It's just a place where you know what's going to happen, and you can get through the next bridge. You can bridge to the next place. Because you know the arc of that story, so you can let some of that go and focus on all those other issues.
I think as parents, if you know that the reading curriculum, the instructional reading is happening and is going to be rich and is going to expose them to that, you can let that independent reading be where your child wants to read. And we make a really big distinction between those two. And that's the question I get as the curriculum person a lot. My child was sent home with this book, and I know they can read more than that.
Right.
They can. And this is their independent reading book, and this is their instructional reading book. And sometimes instructional is because we want to put context around the content of it. We want to have a discussion. We want to make sure that they're really understanding and can put the emotions in the proper place, or drawing the right conclusions. And sometimes it's so that we can help them create that stamina and not turn off or turn in or feel defeated. So that's happening. So the independent reading, it's really important to let them consolidate. They consolidate at their own pace. Let them consolidate and don't put the attention on how big their book is or how fast they read. When the attention goes there, they develop really bad reading habits.
Well, on the flip side with the intention, where I'm thinking it's positive, and then all of a sudden our behavior changes. Here's what just happened recently. Madeline is 5. She's pre-K, and she wanted me every time I read, Daddy, I want you to put your finger right along the words that you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, why do you want to do that? She goes, I want to know what that is. I want to know what it is. Okay, so I ended up doing that. For weeks, she wanted me, Daddy, put your finger down. Okay, here we go, and I'm putting the finger, and then sometimes she put her finger there, and she's just going, I go, do you know which one that was? And she goes, she just wouldn't answer. She didn't know, but she's getting the gist, I guess. But now she stopped doing it. She doesn't ask me to do that. Is that okay? At what point should I be?
She's invested in books, and she loves her books, and she understands process and strategy. And I would say you want to celebrate what she knows, and you know that she has a love for books and an understanding for reading. That's a strategy we practice in school. So it could have been that she saw that, or she was practicing that in class, and then she carried it over to home. But just know, all through her next few years at school, we'll still be doing that. I take an index card and I cut out 2 lines in the middle, and I make a reading window, and they slide the card across the book. And that really is for kids who have visual tracking. And it's hard, especially as they get into chapter books, tracking the text on the page. Some kids like to use their finger. Some kids like to slide the card. Some kids like to use their eraser on their pencil. But she's learning the tracking and scanning process of reading. So just know that that's the skill that she was practicing, not necessarily the reading of the actual words. But she's she's on her way to being a phenomenal reader. So she already has that.
And you don't have to push things in home.
Yeah.
She's letting you know, just follow those cues, but it's good to ask.
Yeah. Maybe introduce Pinkalicious.
There's Goldalicious, Emeraldalicious. Yes, we have them all. But we don't have any Sweet Valley High books.
No Sweet Valley High.
Now we get eBay. Yeah, go on eBay.
Better than trading cards.
So I have just a comment and maybe a question. Going back to when you were talking about the Magic Treehouse series, which we've read almost all of them twice. They are great books. They're just so gentle and innocent, and I love those books. However, now Alex is starting to show some interest in other series, and I'm having a lot of trouble allowing him to read certain ones because of words. Like the Dork Diaries. I don't like the word dork.
Yeah, we don't have those here.
But like, he really wanted to, all the kids were reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid. So I'm like, okay, I'll go buy the first one. Within the first 2 pages, it says jerk and moron.
Right.
Yeah. We don't have them either. It's not, I mean, they're out there. Kids are reading them, that's great.
So I don't want to if he's interested, I want him to read it, but I don't want him to read jerk and moron.
I think it's difficult because there are the books that are popular and marketed at Barnes & Noble and on the main tables, and the movies, I mean, it's really tough. But there are plenty of other series.
Right.
So many other ones over there that the Stink books, I know it's kind of
we have all the Stink ones,
they're really good, actually, and there's a new one out. The A to Z Mysteries, the Akimbo, the boy whose father has the wildlife reservation. I can think of, there are 5 other series over there that are around the same place. But that's a challenge because a lot of kids are reading them. Right.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's like saying, I'm raising a movie critic and I'm going to let them watch any movie they want. No, you're going to say no.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not going to let them watch some of those things. And I don't think they're going to stop reading. They're going to understand that in our house, we don't think like that and we don't like to talk like that. And so, what you read goes into your mind, it goes into your soul. And so we take that really seriously and we're going to think about that.
And I think having that conversation is totally fine. And you can say, it's not
stopping reading.
Yeah. If you were to say to Alex, you can't read this book because I just don't want you to, but if you have that conversation with him, the kids they're so willing to listen. And I think, we live in fear of, especially a reluctant reader or kids who are still building their confidence, that when they become passionate about a book because their friends reading it, like Harry Potter for some kids, they're like, it's giant, I just want to read a giant book. But to have that conversation with them, I just don't feel that the content of Harry Potter is appropriate for a kindergartner.
Or sometimes, a 3rd grader.
Yeah.
We're reading books so early now, and then they don't get the richness of the book, and they're picking up a lot of images and a lot of things they can't contextualize yet. That's not good. That's not a great strategy. So I don't know. I think I will cry if Shelley ever is not here because I so depend on her knowing, like, oh, here, you like this, do this one instead because that's going to give you the.
So that's what's happening? It's like when the kids are coming down here from Children's House, someone's helping them pick a book up?
Oh, yes. They don't just wander out with, that's good, you're 4, take Harry Potter, No.
No fragile ego here.
No. We gently redirect, or we serve kids here who are 3 and kids who are 14. So it's a really diverse group of readers, but everyone has, either Mary, who's sitting over there, or I, we're always here, and most of the kids we know because of the size of the school, so we can say, I noticed you've taken a lot of books about this, why don't you try this one?
She just brought home this pony book that someone helped her with picking it up, and she loves it.
Oh, good. That's good. Ponies are always a separate basket of ponies. They're very popular. Yes. And parents come in all the time. I was just going to say that to help.
And I just had to.
That cheese book?
Exactly. Parents help. If Kelly's here, she'll help. So there's always someone here. Between the 3 of us who work in here, one of us is always here. But we know the kid. Like it's never a random random choice.
There's a lot of thought to that.
There's a lot of thought to what's available on the shelf. There's nothing on the shelf over here that would be like, oh my gosh, you brought this home. I was thinking back to Lisa's question. Another thing that publishers are doing, which I think is somewhat can be really good, is that given the popularity of Dork Diaries and Wimpy Kid, there are other series out there that have the same kind of vibe or look, but are much better quality. So that kids who aren't reading Wimpy Kid or Dork Diary at first or second grade but want that feel, there are books here that kind of have that same vibe but are very different. Don't underestimate graphic novels either. They've changed a lot and they're really, really good. And they're complex reading because in a graphic novel, Dragon Breath is a great example. This is something anybody would be proud to carry instead of the Wimpy Kid. They're funny and sweet, but also they kind of look like something a little older. But what I like about graphic novels is they're really dependent on text and illustration. Yeah. So you have to read the picture. They often contradict the text, which is kind of cool because you might be reading one thing, but then look what he's actually doing. Yeah. And so,
I spend a lot of time. There's Dr. Lawrence Seitz, who was a professor at UPenn. I've done a whole unit of study, and this for me, it's his glossary of picture book terminology, and so thinking about like the end pages being the curtain of a story, but really actually thinking like an illustrator. So I'll spend a lot of time questioning the illustrations with kids and even older kids, and that was an intentional unit of study I did with a group of second graders at a previous school because they were so hung up on the idea of I have to read chapter books. I have to read the fattest chapter book because that means I'm the greatest reader ever. And so we did this whole picture book study, but I mean, if you're ever interested, I'm happy to share this list of terminology. It's very technical, but the kids think it's fantastic, and they'll be like, Bridget, I found a double-page spread with it's a full-page bleed, and on the next page is continuous narration, and it showed this and this and this, but it helps with the development of the comprehension. And then those are intentional conversations you could have like with a graphic novel, and you could be like, oh my gosh, do you see how the illustrator totally contradicted what happened in the story, and look what he did right here in the background with this subtle, hint of green. Did you notice that green has carried throughout the whole book? And wait a minute, the end pages are green. So the color green has some major importance here. It'll stimulate a whole conversation with them. And then it takes the focus off, I have to read a big fat book. I'm reading a book and I'm loving the book and I'm understanding it. But until I actually knew the technical terms, I wasn't actually looking at picture books with a purposeful eye. So I'm happy to share this with you. It will help with Fancy Nancy. A little bit about the importance of her baubles.
Tell us, how often do the lower elementary kids have reading workshop or writing workshop?
Yeah, so writing workshop is scheduled 3 times a week in the classrooms, and the teachers we're kind of co-teaching those lessons. So I might come in and make a guest appearance and teach a lesson, or the teachers have picked up a unit of study and they've been switching on and off. And
as we're piloting that program, they meet every week with Bridget and are talking about what's the teaching point, what's the follow-up, and Bridget is in observing, I go in and observe sometimes to just really keep us all on the same page and see what do we need to do around professional development to move to that place where they can independently do it. But right now, Bridget is really involved in that in all of the classrooms, which has the double benefit of Bridget knows all of the kids. So as a learning specialist, she can also hear and pick up things really quickly around, I want to supplement this here, or I think we need to bring this in there. So it feels like there's a richness of attention being paid on the development of reading and writing, which was our focus this year. Just really thinking about that.
And what about kindergarten? So do you pull out certain kids that have a similar level reading?
Yeah, so there are, just to help support that kindergarten curriculum, thinking about that transition as they're moving into LE. So I use the terminology push and pull out, but so I might go in and spend a significant amount of time just in a room and working with a variety of kids. And so that provides an opportunity for the kids that I have targeted as a learning specialist, that they might need a little more support. But then I also give an opportunity for other children who might just have this one particular skill that we need to focus on, but they don't necessarily need learning services support. So when I push in, it provides an opportunity for a broader spectrum of children. And I love working with all the kids. But then I also have an opportunity where I might take a small group of students and then we go have a more intentional conversation around reading or a book. And that would just be like that pull-out model. But I primarily try to be in the rooms so that I can be that third teacher. That I'm not just someone who comes and takes kids out of the room, but when I see the kids, I was laughing at Nina this morning. She goes, "What happened?" And I was like, "I used the hair dryer this morning." She goes, "You look good." I don't know if she would have said that to me if I were just a teacher who came to grab particular children. So they don't really see me as the learning services teacher.
We didn't want that. I mean, I think we thought a lot about what is our learning services model going to be. How do we want to construct that? And we hired teachers that are special education in lower elementary and upper elementary who work in curriculum development and work in the classrooms to move away from that pull-out model. That's an antiquated model. We don't believe in it. We don't really like it. Sometimes you need that directed, targeted services and kids walking out of the room to do that. But if Bridget or Tara are teachers, it's not like you're one of Bridget's kids. Like you're one of, there's none of that.
They're all
in our school. And the other piece of that means that Tara and Bridget are involved in curriculum planning all the time. They meet around all the curriculum decisions. So much of the accommodations that need to be made in a pull-out model happen because the teaching model originally was not set up to benefit all learners. You can proactively do that in curriculum design. So that's our thought. And I will often hear Tara in a planning meeting say, "But wait a minute, what about this learner? This learner is going to be overwhelmed by this much information on the page. So can we change the directions to look like this?" And actually, most kids will benefit from that. So we really look at how do we proactively do that so the kids don't even know that it's been done. And that's really helpful.
I like the proactive instruction versus reactive instruction.
That's our model, and that's what we think a lot about. So I think sometimes parents will question about, do we really have a robust learning services team because there's not so much pull-out happening? And our answer is it's more robust because we have them full-time working in the classrooms with the teachers in curriculum design and modeling accommodations. That also, when Bridget models an accommodation that a child who's been flagged in DIBELS, for example, needs, there are other kids who are going to benefit from that, and the teachers can watch that specific special education accommodation and pick it up in their general education practices. And so we all get better. We all get better. And I think I loved being a team teacher when I taught in the middle school. My teaching is so much better than it would have been in any other environment because I had other adults saying to me, "I think you might have lost that child in this lesson," because I was watching their face and they didn't get that thing. It's so fabulous to say, "Oh God, I didn't even," or your lesson is really vocabulary rich, and so how do we supplement that because they're missing a lot of that vocabulary? Okay, we'll do organic vocabulary. That's really great feedback. So anyway, it's a very amazing model to have all those different adults in the room at the same time.
Well, I think one of the gifts of the Montessori classroom with the multi-age, and you kind of did talk about that, where the first grader was really benefiting from overhearing a lesson, and you have talked about sort of the remedial piece that you're able to offer with the pull-out and the push-in. What about the for a child who's ready for more? And yes, when they're a first grader or second, if you're at the beginning of that 3-year cycle, there's that opportunity. It's just built in that you can pull them in with other kids who are ready for older kids.
Yeah.
What about for those years that are on the end of their 3-year cycle, that kindergarten year, the 3rd grade year, the 6th grade year? How do you give them more? Am I asking that right? Are you offering?
Extending as well as supporting.
Yeah.
So we're talking here about.
And I'm not talking personal,
No.
personal means. I just in general.
Yeah, I would say, that's that level of differentiation, and that's that conversation piece that we have during curriculum planning. So, and that's the piece that I feel like I love to give to those meetings and that planning time. So like when we're looking at a unit of study, and we're planning, the Native American unit of study, say, in LE, I might say that, in previous experiences, and I taught second and third grade, this is what I did with second and third graders for Native American unit of study. And this is what I did for that third grader who actually could function on a fifth grade reading level. And so I think that we look at and then we scaffold what we're doing to not allow those children to feel like they're just doing busy work, that you never want work to become full of purposelessness. So when you're talking to a child about the work that they're doing, they should be able to tell you what they're doing and why they're doing it. And if they're not able to tell you what they're doing and why they're doing it, then it's not purposeful to their learning. So those essential questions that we ask the kids, we have an upcoming project coming up, and Donna and I have been working on essential questions to use from, kindergarten through middle school.
We're doing on May 1st. There's a whole
school share.
Parents are invited in, and it's a whole school thing. Yeah. You need to know that we've been planning that unit so that it's integrated in since for 2 months probably, and looking at how do we make this something that is a K through 8 and is going to extend learning all the way through the curriculum and tie-in, because it's so great to be in a learning community that's K through 8. And we are committed to twice a year really doing a K through 8 kind of project where, like the Learning Fair was an example, or American Ingenuity with a character with the math. So you can see how it takes a long time. We started a program director meeting in November saying, okay, here's our idea. How do we make this really work in where you are in your curriculum map, and where you are child developmentally, and in what learners you have right now, so that it's not a waste of their time and it's not just an added thing.
And asking those purposeful questions, like one of our essential questions that we would ask the children, and even the kindergartner, like how does creativity affect craftsmanship? And so with a kindergartner, you would talk about the word creativity, and you would talk about craftsmanship. I can remember doing a lesson with a group of my second and third grade social studies class, and we were talking about culture and environment and influence, those 3 words. And all we did was define culture, define environment, and define influence. And it was like a little light bulb went on, and they all of a sudden were like, oh my gosh, culture is influenced by your environment, and environment is influenced by your culture, and it sprung off into this conversation, and that was the jumping point for our unit of study of westward expansion, and looking at how the environment influenced people and where they ended up settling. But for a second grader to be talking about that type of vocabulary in a very purposeful manner, that's why we think about those essential questions. And then we think about those enduring understandings. What do we want them to walk away with? What is the purpose of this lesson?
And Bridget, talking about that, in Montessori, she created the 5 great lessons. And the 5 great lessons do that. So here is, through story, a great lesson that we're going to give around the fundamental needs. And so there is a curriculum in place that is already tying in every human shares these 5 fundamental needs and is influenced by your environment. And what's the interplay of that is explored so extensively, Children's House and Lower Elementary, that when they are in upper elementary, that's just ingrained in them. They understand that connection. That in Bridget's school, you did that in your classroom, but it's not like the whole curriculum is built on developing that, which was sort of Montessori's kind of standing back and looking at all these 5 big areas of study, and how do we put them into something that's comprehensive, that gives an underpinning that allows kids' critical thinking to develop in a systematic way. I think that's the stuff that's hard for parents to see and understand, and it's hard for me to, I wish I could just talk about it all the time, because there's so much of that going on, and at some level we say, you just have to know what's happening, but of course, how do we...
And thinking about Becky's question more kind of on a practical level, Kelly just reminded me that there's things like third grade library tech class. So even just in that when you were asking about a third grader, there are lots of things that people do, like sixth grade, it's the capstone project, and third grade, they have the pull out, I guess, for library and technology class, which they really love. So they have a chance to expand what they've been doing and explore some other things.
Eighth graders are going to New View this year. I don't know
Oh,
how many
yeah,
of you
that's
know, but
really
we really
cool.
look at the top level of each thing. And
There
say,
are things.
We really need to give them a capstone experience that expands their sense of leadership. So, obviously the play.
I was just thinking about the play.
You have a lead in the play, not based on ability. It's based on your third year, you're a sixth year, you're an eighth grader, you're going to have kindergarten, you're having a lead in the play. But in eighth grade now, this year, our kids will be going for 2 weeks to an MIT lab with applied technology where they get real-world problems that they need to solve through a simulated 2-week immersion with all of the most cutting-edge technology with real-world professionals who come in and lead that exploration. So that is a culminating experience that I, for example, am not technical, let's say, but I am going to be stretched in that way and bring my maybe global thinking or systems thinking approach to it, and so that's going to stretch me. Or I'm really technical and love these gadgets, but I have to think about how do I solve this problem, so that means I'm going to expand my thinking in these other ways. And so the idea always is that it's applied. So we're applying our learning. We're always looking for authentic audience and authentic experience, because that's what applied knowledge is what ingrains it and helps our kids learn it. So we're always looking at those.
And Becky, that's why in that class, that third grade library tech class, when Kelly talks to them about the technology pieces, we always refer to UE. Like, next year you'll be researching this or doing this. What are you studying now? We try to take what they're doing and apply it to what Kelly's showing them.
And I don't know if Julie said this, but when we made the deal with New View is the MIT lab that the kids will be going to. What's funny for me is that they work with high schools, and they don't work with middle schools or elementary schools in any way. And they chose to work with us because they like Montessori kids. They said that Montessori kids are better thinkers, they're more open-minded, they're willing to try, to risk, to fail, to not just give the one right answer that in a traditional setting they're asked to give. So we were delighted that they've taken us on as their pilot project for middle school.
We talked a lot, Saeed is going to come to school, so
yes,
people have a chance to meet him.
Yeah.
Talked a lot about, he was involved with our strategic plan as we looked at this. They came in and spoke around where should schools be headed. And so he talked a lot about what he can't find anymore are kids who can iterate, because they get so defeated if they have to go back to the drawing board, for example. They just want it to be done and be right. And when he gives feedback, they kind of want to take their marbles and go home. And he's just lamenting, where are these people who can be asked to revise? It's not, what's your writing? Statement?
Once you're done, you've just begun. Nailing kids, they can tell you that.
And they will all say that. And so, Donna and I talk a lot about that idea of iteration, and it's not just going to happen when they go to 8th grade in New View, but where are we doing that right now in Children's House? How many opportunities do they have to fail and go back and do it again? We're really looking at that. How are we developing resilience in the iteration process? I watch upper elementary in their big writing process is every revision and every draft comes together, and you put it all together with your final, and you look at that process. How long
I have that here for even Ellie, like their writing folders are, chock full of papers, and, I'm still working on it, and this is a story I feel that I'm done, and I don't want to take it any further, in understanding that process. But, one part of our celebration of writing and writing workshop is for them to take out, they start in their journal, and they're starting with story arcs, and they're mapping out ideas, and they're writing seed stories to stimulate this draft. Then, after they're doing the planning and organizing, then they're drafting on paper. Like, there is such a process, and this is a process that they're doing in all of LE. So the first year kids, second year, and third years. And then there's this process of revision, and so you can see that the student first he was going back and revising and using color in between his text, and then he was like, Bridget, I've revised so much that I can't even follow it anymore. And I said, well, guess what writers do when that happens? They write a second draft. He was like, I think I need to do that. I really do. And so that process of revision, where our first unit of study with writing, they were like, I wrote it, it's done. I finished it, it's done.
But I mean, we had a culture of, we really have thought about this because we had a culture of people doing that, and that's around in the air right now. And we're saying we've got to go back and make sure that's not happening. So a lot of thought is being played into
happening
that.
right. We're rooting it right in the
Iteration,
middle.
it's the process, it's the process, it's the process, it's the process.
But any of them, you can say to them, is your writing ever done? And they'll say, no, it's only just begun. I'm just testing today.
So do you have any other questions? I know we're up against our 10 o'clock stop. Do you have any questions? It is almost 10.
I have a question, but it's just like a personal question about Charlie. Like, I know that I feel like she's a pretty good decoder, and she's probably always been, but I think that her comprehension is getting a lot better.
Yeah.
And she has mentioned before, like the one time I told her, when she was in her room for a little bit, hold on, I gotta cut out my window and
Her reading window.
Yeah, so she's like, I'm making a reading window. I'm like, would you just take me home and read already? And she's like, no, I'm making my reading window. So I was wondering if that is something that I should make sure that she always has when she's doing reading. Or I forget what you call that.
Yeah, it's just that index card with the middle cut out of it. That's what she's making.
But I mean, the type of reader.
Oh, for scanning.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say she's a decent scanner, but I think because she likes the tool and she's excited to use it and she's applying it to her reading, then I would be like, okay, quick, cut out your window, and let's get reading. Or I'll cut out the window, you go get settled and get your book ready. Because sometimes, like before with Dan, they're just excited to use a tool that they've been taught. I think that if that's something that she wants, then let her go for it. I think for me, I always look at what to celebrate in that moment. She actually was being proactive and knew a tool that could help her and wanted to initiate it, and so I say yay. Thank you. She listened.
There come a point though where you don't want them to do things like that anymore. Knows that it's at college.
Yeah.
High school.
The matter is, we'll have very different discussions when in 10 years from now about each of them. They're going to go through this when they're ready. I don't think we should push them.
No.
It's like learning to walk. All of those things. They're going to say, I'm tired of this when they're ready to say, I'm tired of this. And it's really okay. We don't have to rush them.
It's like the Magic Treehouse discussion. They tell us when they're done.
Yeah, they really do.
They really do.
They really do. That's the hardest thing. I mean, I think we say that all the time. If everybody had a crystal ball and could see where their child ended up, they're going to tell you, and if you're listening and responsive and paying attention and having those conversations and celebrating with them, then they grow in the confidence, they grow in the trust with you, they don't have this sense that there's something wrong with me, this is one thing that we never want to give a child. Why are you still doing this? You should be doing this. They get that really quickly. So when you can be comfortable and calm and believe that they're doing great and know that you can come in and bring any of those worries, concerns, fears that every parent has to teachers and professionals who are in this environment and know them so well, it allows you then to give them that space just to love them and say, this is great. I'm so happy that you're doing this and I want to do it with you. That, I think, the peace of mind that this type of an environment gives, because we know your kids so well and we want you to come in and ask those questions. It's really important to have that partnership.
I had a parent visit me recently whose child came through here, and she was in my office, I would say 3 times a year, crying because he just couldn't read. There was something, and the truth is that we gave him the strategies he needed, and I kept saying to her, he's going to learn to read. By the time he gets to college, he's going to be able to read a textbook, I promise you, And he's finished Worcester Polytech. Where was he just hired? He was hired as a junior in college. For Verizon, to be a manager at Verizon, because he's a good engineer and a good thinker, And she said finally learns to read college texts. I said, yes, of course. All of those things happen in time. he was just not ready. And we were ready to push, and she was ready to push. We were saying, he's got all the tools, he's got all the strategies, we're just going to help him practice them. And he practiced them. And that's what pays off over time, you know. And kids do, they have their own